welcoming you all later this year in my country, the United Arab Emirates. Having spent my career really focusing on nature, conservation, biodiversity, the challenges and the opportunities that come with it, and simultaneously serving as the president of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, it will come as no surprise to you that I will be driving this agenda forward, linking the nature and climate agenda as we head to COP28. A key part of this agenda and of special importance to the United Arab Emirates are mangroves. Mangroves are a gem because of their capacity to deliver simultaneously for people, for oceans, for biodiversity, and for climate. It is important that to note that at today's event, here at the One Forest Summit, that will help critical forest ecosystems, that we have this recognition within the global forest agenda, and the importance really of having mangroves as part of the forest agenda. The mangrove breakthrough is a compass for the world to better perform in restoring and protecting mangroves. All stakeholders are invited to take part and contribute to achieve those goals. The mangrove breakthrough is part of the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda of the Marrakesh Partnership, which has defined key 2030 adaptation outcome targets as high-impact solutions that can accelerate resilience to the climate risk faced by people in vulnerable communities around the world. 2023 is an important year to progress on mangroves with two global initiatives driving actions. At COP27, we saw the launch of the Mangrove Breakthrough, but we also saw the launch of the Mangrove Alliance for Climate, really headed by the United Arab Emirates and Indonesia and joined by 5 other countries. What is important is to ensure that those initiatives support one another, complement one another, and really drive the ambition loop for mangrove protection and restoration. We are here at a summit that's looking at the whole gamut that is required for protection. We're looking at carbon credits, potentially biodiversity certification. We're looking at grant-making vehicles. What is also important is to recognize that there's going to be a number of different initiatives and mechanisms to fund mangrove initiatives around the world. And it's important to understand that each mechanism will have a different need depending on the region and the situation and the context. So really, all mechanisms should have a seat on the table. And that is really the spirit of COP28. We want to make sure that we are pragmatic in the types of solutions that we need to bring and ensure that those are matched equally by pragmatic financial solutions. And with that, Ignace, I give the floor back to you and look forward to this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Razan. Now, I guess you are all wondering what exactly is the mangrove breakthrough, so just give me show you that on the slide if it works. So that's the targets that we have set by 2030 with a community of scientists. So the goal is to restore 15 million of hectares by 2030, and to do so we need to secure $4 billion. With this, we believe that we will set mangrove on a trajectory to full restoration and protection by 2050, because we will have set the financial mechanism and enhancement of the local communities to reach this 2050 target. So that's the ambition that we have set for the world to move forward. Now, we need to identify, and this is the start of the journey today, on how we can reach this 4 billion target and make significant announcements by COP28 to show the world that we are on a path to reach these goals of 15 million of hectares restored, and show with some very concrete example that it's possible to create sustainable finance mechanism for mangrove restoration beyond ODA money, beyond just bilateral grant funding. How can we create sustainable business model financial schemes that ensure long-term financing for mangrove at the scale needed again globally? So that's just a challenge we are facing. We are already have received significant funding to set up the secretariat for the long term, so that's already achieved. Now we are currently setting up an advisory financial working group with several global banks and other advisors joining us to identify what are the gaps, where are the good mechanisms to set it up and to scale up to reach this 4 billion target. And this is the discussion that we would like to have with you today and learn from you, from your country and your experience. To give us a few insights on this perspective, I would like to invite two speakers. First of all, Fanny Lothier, the CEO of Southbridge Investment, who is a leader in scaling private investment for climate in Africa. And the question for you, Fanny, is how can we reach this 4 billion target? You've launched several global or Africa-led initiatives for finance and nature. Can you enlighten us with a few points that could be replicated for mangrove, these specific ecosystems? Thank you, Fanny.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Ignace, for the question. It's always a challenge to come and speak after a long day of conversations and discussions, so I'll make my remarks short and to the point. We've already seen the challenge. Mangroves are about 19% of the forest cover of Africa, but we're losing around 4 million hectares a year. That's about $65 billion worth of loss per year, just from the mangrove part of deforestation. And they serve a very important function, not only for biodiversity, but also the communities rely on these assets for their own day-to-day activities. I just was in Zanzibar for an investment forum, and we were very fortunate to visit the mangrove forests there. And you realize what an action of a government can do to transform from deforestation to natural reforestation and also human-supported reforestation. Because now the mangrove forests are protected in Zanzibar, so you cannot cut them to build housing or any of the other activities that the mangrove wood was being used for. But then you still have to serve the community. So what the government has been able to do is to balance the reforestation with using sustainable forestry, creating green construction products. So the timber industry is involved, the construction industry is involved, and then bringing those materials to build housing and other activities on the island so that you can preserve the mangrove. So what this tells you is the importance of these community holistic approaches that allow the community to still have a livelihood while preserving the forest. And to get this going, you need unique financing solutions that allow that holistic approach to take place. So how do you do that? The first thing, and I'm very proud to say, we are the first, and as of now, the only African financial institution that has signed up for the Finance Sector Deforestation Action Initiative. This is the first step to stop deforestation. And the example of Tanzania that I gave just shows you how quickly you can regenerate forests when you do that. But we need other financial institutions to join in because we cannot be the only ones to do that. So I invite all of you here who are from the finance sector to contribute and sign up to that initiative. But the second thing we've done is we've looked at how does financing currently happen to protect, restore, and preserve the mangrove forest, and what can be done then to raise the 4 billion that Ignace mentioned is required. So we came up with a solution that basically shows that instead of doing a one-to-one investment where you take philanthropic capital, grant money and other concessional finance and you invest it in preserving, reforesting, and restoring land, if you use it in a different way, you can actually leverage the liquidity in the markets to crowd in even more financing and therefore do more than the one-to-one solution that is currently in place. And that's what we've done. We've structured an instrument that allows us to take philanthropic capital and use it in a way that raises liquidity in the market, but also supports some of the early work that is needed to prepare the communities to do the work that is required to move forward. And with that, we're able to go from a few $100 million to $2 billion in the leveraging ratio that is required. The second thing that is equally important is then to verify that those assets have been created and that they're of good quality. And again, this requires not only technology, like satellite-based remote sensing technology, which can monitor large spaces, but also ground verification. And here again, working with small-scale SMEs that are very dynamic in Africa, creating digital verification tree by tree. And with that, we can aggregate the technologies and be able to give this granular verification along with spatial confirmation. And we heard this morning how important that is for the gourmet forest assets that we've been talking about, and that would be possible to do, especially when you are looking at mangroves, which are very hard to see from satellite because of the way in which the forest grows. You have to go and look at the quality of the root system and other sort of granular details, and therefore you need to combine these technologies. And then the third thing that we've done is then to link the reforestation agenda with the development agenda. Because in Africa, when you cut forests, it's because you need the forest for livelihood, whether it's cooking fuel, whether it's construction materials, whether it's revenues that you use from trading the wood, and so on. So if you can link the development objectives with the reforestation objectives, you give not just an incentive not to deforest, but also an incentive to preserve and protect what has been reforested. And that's something that we are doing again through a unique approach of creating those assets. Just to close, since some of you may have heard what we said in Sharm el-Sheikh, since Sharm el-Sheikh we have now identified $15 billion worth of assets that can be created using this methodology that I described. And we have a $2 billion fund, so you can see the gap is huge. So there's room for others to come in, and I encourage again all of you. I see James sitting here. He has a very innovative approach also to do that, so there are opportunities to crowd in others as well. And I think I will end here in the interest of time, because I know there are many others who we would like to hear from, by saying that forests for us at Southbridge present three qualities that mimic us as a firm and our philosophy. First, forests are like banks, right? They absorb carbon dioxide, they save it, and they generate savings in the oxygen that comes out in order for us to function. So they function like banks. And for us as an investment bank, that is a good characteristic. Secondly, forests actually mimic the human body. So when the human body is healthy, we can tell because our lungs are functioning well, and likewise with the forests. And at Southbridge Investments, we have a series of instruments, one of which is a sports fund, and so we can relate forests to the exciting world of sports that a lot of people pay attention to and find ways to bridge those two together with a program we called Millions of Wins for the Planet, where whenever an African anywhere in the world scores, either a goal or a record, etc., we're able to link that to a reforestation activity. But then the third aspect for forests, which I think is very close to our hearts at Southbridge, is that forests have this very innovative test, learn, and scale approach. Because trees, when trees are subjected to drought, they shed just enough leaves to survive the drought, but not to lose all of the capacity for photosynthesis, which is important for them to regenerate themselves when the drought is over. And so nature is teaching us how to deal with risk and challenges in a way that doesn't kill you, but allows you to survive even amongst the worst crises. And so our approach of testing and learning and managing risk as the risks materialize is also very nicely demonstrated naturally by the forests. And that's why forests are very close to our investment philosophy. So thank you, Ignace, for that. And I wish you all a great afternoon.
Thank you very much, Fanny. That was very, very interesting. So I hope you and your team will be joining this advisory finance group that we will set up in the coming weeks in the run-up to COP28, because we really need this insight from the private sector to co-design financial projects that will be fit for purpose for the market. Now I would like to invite Jeff Mwangi, founder of Climate Action Platform Africa, to share with us his perspective on the role of local and coastal communities indeed to set up the pipeline of projects for this money to flow at the right level, and how can we give sufficient support to local communities to make sure that that's a really part of these financial systems for this ecosystem. Please, James.
Thank you, Ignace. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real privilege to be here. My big sister Franny talked about the challenge of coming in at the end of a very long day and the challenge of that. Mine is slightly worse because I get to come up here after Franny has just dropped a very thorough and comprehensive and thoughtful set of perspectives. I was literally going down my list of smart things I was thinking of saying, going, that's gone. That's also gone. And at the same time, looking out on an audience that probably knows a lot more about aspects of this topic than I do. But perhaps I'll offer a particular entry point. So, Ignace, as you said, one of the roles I play is I'm the founder of the Climate Action Platform Africa, which proceeds from the view that climate action at scale presents one of the most promising opportunities to create quality and dignified livelihoods for the rising numbers of Africa's youth. In other words, for the planet to meet its Paris goals, it must leverage the power of Africa's young people as the real shock troops of restoring the climate. And conversely, for Africa to truly transform its economy, it has to be through and not in spite of climate action. Now, if you believe that, then you look at a breakthrough target like the one that's on the screen right now, $4 billion, 15 million hectares, that represents a lot of work that needs to be done. It's a pool of potentially committed capital, and you heard from Franny some of the amazing work that's being done to mobilize that capital. But importantly, in order to deploy that capital, you need people who will do the work. And one of the things that I'm taking a real interest in, and through some of the work we're doing at Africa Climate Ventures, is how do we move the way that we think of the African people in the areas where these mangroves are from just an undifferentiated mass that we call communities into new entrepreneurs and operators of businesses that operate in harmony with the ecology. And you already heard some of the examples of the opportunities that proceed from that. We know the impact that mangroves have on aquaculture. So how are we preparing a new generation of players in the aquaculture space that operate in harmony with nature? You heard about the value of new construction techniques. How are we preparing new ventures, new business models for construction using sustainable materials? And importantly, you heard about the crucial work that needs to be done if we are to track, validate, and value mangroves. We need a whole new category of data, collected rigorously and consistently all across the continent. Now, if we try and do that by flying in experts or having external capacity flown into communities, A, our $4 billion isn't going to go as far as we would like it to, and B, we will be acting on communities rather than through communities. Because remember, in every one of those communities is a generation of young people who have grown up in the digital age, have gone to school, are looking for jobs that will allow them to play a role for themselves and for their families and for the planet into the future. And so what I wanted to bring into this conversation as we think about this massive challenge is that we should not only think about the challenge of investing in terms of the commercial numbers. The financing that needs to be raised and leveraged is substantial, and it requires all of the innovative tools that have already been described and more. But at the same time, we need to be thinking about this as a new value chain. And if you're thinking of it as a value chain, you need to be thinking about what are all the roles in that value chain that these critical communities can be prepared to play. And that preparation starts now, and often costs a lot less than the large sums that will be needed later to actually fund the work. But if it starts now, it creates a virtuous cycle, a feedback loop in which community after community can see its neighbors benefiting from participating in the mangrove economy and can create a demand for this from the communities themselves. And again, the critical point there is investing and operating in ways that allow us to operate through the community, not on the community, as we try to achieve this breakthrough. I'll pause there and hopefully lead into more conversation.
Thank you so much, James. Now it's over to you all. I would like to invite you to share your thoughts, very openly on your expertise on mangrove restoration and protection, with a link to finance. And the objective is to inform on how we can reach this 4 billion target in, again, as James and Franny said, in an inclusive manner that benefits nature, but of course people as well. And how we can develop mechanism like how can we use aquaculture as an industry to be stewards of mangrove restoration? How can we create business models that are mangrove positive? Similar to the work that I've done, for instance, on coral reef, with a global fund for coral reef, on how we can work with existing business models that are currently having negative impact on mangrove and turn the tide to make them mangrove positive. So I would like to hear your thoughts, not on these points, and or any additional element that you would like to bring to the conversation. This is really a discussion, so please raise your hand. There is mics available, and I will be happy to give them to you. Or if you have question or for Franny or James, yeah, please.
Yes.
Hello.
I wanted to mention something, mostly because sitting behind me is Wanjira. And in the remarks that I made, because of interest of time, I shortened quite a bit what I wanted to say. When we announced in Sharm el-Sheikh this innovative approach that we're taking, it wouldn't have been possible without the support and the long years of focusing on this subject by the World Resources Institute, and Wanjira is here. I hope you can come and tell us more, but also from the support of the Bezos Earth Fund, because they gave that capital to experiment and test and learn in this area. And I think I just wanted to mention that since you are sitting here and you would be the best voice to represent that, we can hear from you, if that's all right, Ignace.
Thank you, Franny. I mean, I think the most important part of this is that the work that was done in advance of creating that momentum was political in nature. It needed a lot of groundwork to essentially get a political commitment that was 100 million hectares of land for restoration made at the African Union by African leadership, committed by different countries, to then convert into real commitments on the ground. So national commitments, breaking down that 100 million hectares of land. That was the first phase. And that phase now moves into what I think James so elegantly put. How does that then convert to real action on the ground? And that's where the real work is. And one of the things that at the Bezos Earth Fund, Andrew Steele likes to say is, we need the plumbing for that funding to flow. That we have the commitments, we have the goodwill, we even have the entrepreneurs who will power the restoration movement. But what we did not have and still are, and thanks to you, Franny, and others, is the plumbing that will allow the flow of finance and finance at scale to make the difference. And I think that's where those pieces come together. AFR 100 is a movement that has moved, quite frankly, from an inspirational idea to real transformative action on the ground. And that's taking a lot of pieces, the political side, the technical side, the finance side, and also for these entrepreneurs and young drivers of climate action, I would say, is making sure that they have the tools and the platforms and the partners like the World Resources Institute to accelerate and catalyze the work that's happening. So it's an all of economy, I say all hands on deck to make it happen.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I think the idea is also to create the idea of a community of actions committed to a target, and how we can create a coherent group working together across government, philanthropic, private sector, again, co-designing the product together for implementation afterwards. Any other reaction or thoughts? Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Donc, je suis Ngogué Françoise, épouse Bamouketou, secteur privé, je dirais simplement, dans le chemin de fer. Je suis déjà très honorée d'être là aujourd'hui. Ma petite contribution est un cri de cœur par rapport au secteur d'activité dans lequel nous nous trouvons, le chemin de fer. Nous sommes aussi largement impliqués dans cette lutte et nous trouvons toute notre adhésion. La contribution que je ferai, c'est que le long de la voie, nous avons justement, si nous prenons par exemple dans le cas du Gabon, nous prenons de Libreville à Franceville, vous allez vous rendre compte que les zones désenclavées sont nombreuses. Je propose justement dans le cas de la communication d'écrire
when we talk about this, it means that we have to take into account culture, because some people may be able to carry out things, but there should be clear culture involved. And with the implementation of this culture, we'll be able to get to what we call understanding, to a threshold to what we want to get at. The funding, we can get that. We can have the logistic, but if the indigenous person or population does not actually get that cultural paradigm, and for him to understand what we want to actually do, we are not going to get to the expected objective. In the case of Gabon, I think that we have to maximize the proximity or nearness. I'm talking about railways. Yes, we are living that. We can actually notice that there's a lot of problems related to deforestation and climate change. The railway workers that we live these things with all various approaches, and I think that with such an opportunity we are able to get at something. Internally, we are trying to work with clubs, RSE, and many other organs, but what we need to do is to go step by step with this population in order to take into account the culture. Thank you very much.
But thank you so much, and your point is really well taken on the need to enhance local communities, and I think the example of train route is quite relevant for mangrove, specifically in a coastal country like Gabon, because mangrove will be a natural buffer to sea level rise and coastal erosion, which will put at risk train and route and road transportation. So I think this is an example of the industry that should be brought on board to provide capital as an investment to ensure in the long term their infrastructure that they used to operate. And how can we bring this institution to commit funding into mangrove restoration as an insurance mechanism, nature-based solution insurance mechanism for their infrastructure? So I think very enlightening comments. Any other thoughts or just reaction? Yeah.
Je vous remercie.
Well, I'm Célestin Camille Mebaliobian. I'm an engineer at the Ministry of Forestry, working for the direction of forest, and we work on forest licenses. I am the one in charge of everything related to forestry management, studies. I'm well conversant with the situation in Gabon. I heard your presentation on the mangrove protection, the goals that you are proposing, that is the goal of 4 billion, and you mentioned a loss of 4% on the surface of mangrove that we know now. The mangrove in Gabon is a little specific because it consists of many things for the protection of fisheries, animals, birds, and we have the pressure of the population of other country through access of the sea can affect this mangrove and conduct a certain number of activities that population in Gabon do not conduct, because let's say that people in Gabon who live next to the mangroves are not many, because the majority of the populations are located on the roadside, and villages are located inland, and the mangroves are coastal. So we live this phenomenon. And in your strategy, you, if we have this case, if some other countries reach this rate, if we don't protect, or if we don't go to this goal, I think we'll come to nothing. So I think that if we go in your approach, trying to envisage direct protection agency. We have National Park Agency, but the logistic is not that enough to cover the whole state. We have a policy that our head of states has developed for years to fight against that destruction. But, you know, the transportation man is meaningless. If you can, in your concept, create a platform which is more efficient, well, that can match what happens in the United States, in which the Coast Guards are well trained to conduct specific activities in very sensitive places. Thank you very much.
So the mangrove breakthrough, as you can read, has an objective of restoration, so replanting trees, but even more importantly is protection. So how can we ensure that there is sustainable finance for the protection of mangrove through the type of mechanism that you have used, that you have mentioned, sorry. So this is part of the thinking. So yeah, but thank you so much for highlighting this, sir.
Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you very much. I too would like to intervene on that vein. I'm Jonas Gemajou. I work for the WWF on climate funding. You know, the mangrove issues, the way you structure it, you know, is a little concerning to me. I think you're a little away, and maybe you had to go to the direct cause of the destruction of the mangrove. That destruction is mainly caused by women who smoke fish. This means that these women that would use the mangrove fish, this wood offers to the smoked fish different values in terms of taste, in terms of color, and also because this wood slowly consumes and dries the fish efficiently. And because when you have this good wood that is well dried, it proceeds the same way. That is the main cause of the destruction of the mangrove. So you can't pretend to have a sustainable management approach without integrating this factor of collaborative or inclusive management with women. I'm not sure it's possible. If you take the statistics in Cameroon, that fish, 75% is become smoked fish. Let me say 50% of the fish is marked, and this is done with the wood taken from the mangrove. So what's to do to provide with an efficient response, which that is to involve women in the sustainable management of the mangrove, but also how to find alternatives to the use, in order not to use the mangrove wood for the smoked fish. I think that is where we have to lay the foundations for the restoration later. Thank you.
Merci, merci beaucoup. Vous m'avez mis l'eau à la...
Well, you put a little grass to the mill.
I think it's a very critical point, and on the other way around, when you cut mangrove to do, to smoke fish, you also destroy the ecosystem that allow fish to grow, because we know that about 86% of fish biodiversity rely on healthy mangrove. So we need to find ways to create job within, mangrove or coastal areas for this woman to stop smoking fish, and rather potentially like oysters or seaweed aquaculture that will create, positive benefits for the local communities while also protecting and restoring mangrove. But it's a very critical point that you raised, so thank you. So ce monsieur est après.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. I am Denis. Research. I was listening to the presentation, and then I was asking myself, maybe building also on the previous intervention, I was asking myself, what is the place of the science, what is the place of the research on this big dynamic? So where are you seeing, the role of the researcher and then all those people that are involved in the science, in moving ahead with this good dynamic that we are putting forward?
Thank you very much. So so science behind this work. So first of all, this work has been developed by the Global Mangrove Alliance. So it's a group of WWF, the Nature Conservancy, IUCN, Wetland International, and the Conservation International. And the scientists came together of all of these NGOs with several other and their peers to develop these targets. So this is really much science-based on the current available science that we know about mangrove and their restoration protection trajectory. Now, where we engage with scientists as a next step is to track progress on where we are. So we'll have a first report on progress on where are we on reaching these targets at COP28, and this will be developed by a scientific working group. And this will continue over time, as I said, since we will set up the secretariat in the coming months to drive this initiative forward.
Ok, merci. Je suis Rolf Mabika Obam.
Thank you very much. I'm called Obam. I'm a researcher at the Masuku University. I would like to draw your attention. When we talk about mangrove restoration, are we talking all about forest? Because there is another paradigm which is very much forgotten, and it has to do with the soil. Forest degradation is actually accompanied with soil degradation, which equally plays ecosystem role. And I would like that in the strategies that we are actually developing, we should take into account that sector, because regarding climate change, we should know that they will be able to actually stock 3 times more carbon than forest, and in the soil is actually stocking 3 times more carbon dioxide or carbon than the forest. So while developing the various strategies, take that into consideration. Thank you very much.
Bien, merci. Je suis...
Thank you very much. Dr. Mida Obam Mebaneda. I am a researcher at the Department of Geography at Omar Bongo University. I am equally president of an NGO. This NGO is called We Need. I would like to share with you my double experience to be able to address what is actually being done at the level of the laboratory where I work. We have been able to develop wide studies on mangrove, and we try to see what actually destroys mangroves in Libreville and in environs, and the various methods which are used. That's a tele detection through the TV. And we actually did that job because we obtained a small financing to do that. And when the funding was over, what should we do? The destruction of mangrove do not wait. We are actually seeking for funding, and at the end of the day, researchers that we are, we may be discouraged because while looking for this funding, the destruction of mangroves is still continuing. So in this regard, what should we do? So that is what I wanted to share with you in my capacity as researcher. This is to say that it is good to provide funds, but we have to make sure that these funds actually get to those who are on the ground to make the work go or move on. And the work I'm referring here actually scientific work. Secondly, in my capacity as a member of an NGO which is famous here in Libreville, we are part of our NGO network accustomed in working to protect the mangrove, notably to remove the waste that are coming to impede the development of these mangroves, or even to plant some of these mangroves to do some kind of restoration. We are trying to pave the way, but it is actually insignificant. And the NGOs and associations that are doing this work are doing so without any lucrative or profit behind it. We actually develop projects, but the positive response on this beat is actually insignificant. And while waiting, what should we do? The last thing I would like to say is actually on the second point of this slide, the restoration of 50% of mangroves. Let me take the case of Libreville. If you look at Libreville, when the mangrove is destroyed, it is actually to settle. So they are not areas that are cleared and just left and abandoned. People settle there. So when talking about the restoration of mangroves, it is important to actually relocate this population that are already found in the environment where mangroves are growing. So I'm going to draw your attention on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this question. I really appreciate it, and will certainly share them with the whole working group. But on your point on finance, and I will build upon what James said, I think really the idea is to create a new value chain for mangrove, and how can we show that mangrove are real assets and give value to mangrove, and with this showing that mangrove have value, financial value, we'll be able to create healthy financial scheme that will be able, hopefully, to provide funding from the scientists to the local communities and to the investors. So this is the vision that we have. It's of course sounds more easy to say than to do. But really, also the other point is we are aiming and we are on a positive path for that to secure high level of philanthropic funding to kick off this work in order to, as the lady said, to enhance local communities, which will include scientific group, to provide, I would say, free money to enhance your work and the work of others to, track progress on mangrove, restore mangrove where possible, and be part of this work and provide the pipeline of projects for these investors that are really crazy asking for projects to be created, where we heard a lot about big money this day, but we need to provide them with the pipeline, and we need to work with you and the communities living close to the mangrove to do so. So that's the vision that we have, and again, I'm very glad to have your input because this is the start of a journey. So all of your comments will be certainly very well taken into account moving forward. You can be sure that nothing is yet set in stone, so it's good timing.
Thank you, Ignace. Yeah, I'm taking the floor as a former IUCN employee, so I was part greatly with Ignace and the team to start the Mangrove Breakthrough and provide information. So I think it's really nice to see that this is actually being anchored both in the ocean and the forest world, because it is this interaction, and I think this cross-learning between these communities will be extremely important. And also hearing really the examples from the underground challenges. I think in a way coming up with this is fairly easy. What you describe are really the challenges that everyone faces on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's indeed, as Ignace said, bringing this along into the development of such initiatives. And I think it's also with the idea behind of creating awareness. So if we have stories, or the initiative, the Breakthrough, has more stories about the practicalities of what works, what doesn't work, I think this is when this becomes real. Because I can say from my work previously at IUCN as well, I had a lot of phone calls in terms of where the project, where can we invest? And I think that is the link we still need to bridge. And I think we have these early efforts. Myself, I was doing two grant funding mechanism, the Blue Natural Capital Financing Facility and the Blue Carbon Accelerator Fund, where we went to projects and really helping that. But it was still small scale. And how do we aggregate those projects together also on a jurisdictional level? That's what we heard today here as well, in terms of bringing the finance that can help not just the mangrove in itself, but the planning purposes. There's suddenly dilemmas and trade-offs that need to be taken into account. And I think having more examples that are presented here and the challenges about the alternative livelihoods, I think that will enrich and really make a Mangrove Breakthrough go forward, and hopefully really bringing these ideas to the investor community, so that it's not just the project by project, but also the different type of blended finance that we've heard so much about today that can come into efforts like this one. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorothée, and we hope to work with you as well on your new role as well. Yeah, so I will say two more intervention because it's already 6 o'clock and it's going to be beach, sunset time, and beer for many of us. So, yeah, sir, and yourself.
Oui.
Well, I am Mr. Alain Gaud from the H2O, the bond. We exist in 2005. Most time we attain conferences and we realize what we want now, or concrete action. And I think that's a good opportunity that we meet such an organization. The problem of our small association is the access to finance. We would like to have a system of panel between big structures like yours and smaller like ours, because, you know, we meet scientific committees and organization, but access to fund is most of the time difficult. We work with, you know, fishermen communities at Akanda, Coco Beach, and if you look at that place, the mangrove is significantly being destroyed The point is the communities are not involved. To have access to fundings, to big structures like yours. So I would like to urge you to combine your speech to practice. So if we, small structures or small association like ours, can get in touch with you, or if you can decentralize, if you look around you, you don't have any indigenous representative. No matter how hard you create project and send, but you don't have no solution. So to have some fun, we are obliged to work with the WWF, with the IUCN, but in vain. So my question is, what's to do to access fund or have the finance and work directly? Let me give you share an experience with you. Since 2005, we have researchers such as Poso, Dr. Abekungo, Dr. Mbega. For us to have the fund, they have to go to the direction of the environment or the ecosystem. The funds have been there for 4 years. It's only when we started a little project that we heard that there was a fund there and the money was returned. So what we want is to have a straight partnership with your structure and small associations. And whether you can decentralize your structure or these type of workshop in communities, areas, because I am a representative here, but it would be good if the whole lot of the community were there. It's good to invest, as you say, 4 million, but how to have this money with our small association? That's where the shoe binges. Well, I consider your point, but I don't have the solution. But maybe at the end of the session, I'll make a proposal. I have a slide on which we can continue working and build on that. We'll take 2 last comments. I'll ask you to be very short. I'm Jean Castagna. I'm from French. We have a little NGO. We've been working for 15 years in Cameroon, Burkina, and many other African countries. We work on a mangrove since 2011. Let me share a little experience with what my friend said in Cameroon. So we work with women. Work we did in Senegal was more oriented to women, for them to fish less. We had to create agricultural structures to protect the mangroves with a high value chain. Now, for the cooking, we developed in Senegal, inland, biocold, which of course is more interesting for the smoked fish. Now, the case in Casamance, I think is special because you don't have any reforestation process to restore the mangrove. And today, we continue to plant because it drains subsidies, credits easily. And in some other areas, fishermen destroy the mangrove after capturing the subsidies because they have to fish. So what we are facing today is the redirection and the finance into other essential places to plant the mangroves. So I'm really interested in what has been said on Gabon and Cameroon, and maybe share that with you. We have funds. We are ready to share them on new areas.
Intervention, and then I will have to close the session.
Well, I'm Saro Legbo Sepiagbara. I'm from the Movement for Ogoni people in Nigeria. I come from the Niger Delta region that have one of the most extensive mangrove forests in Africa. But the challenge remains that is also where we have all the oil extraction going on in Nigeria. And oil extraction has been responsible for the greatest destruction of mangrove forests in Nigeria. Now, if we're talking about mangrove forest restoration, how are we going to deal with that alongside with fossil fuel extraction going on in the same place? Secondly, the Breakthrough Mangrove Project, how are you integrating local communities and indigenous communities in the work of restoration that you want to do around mangrove forests? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I think it's a good segue to the conclusion. But first of all, thank you all so much for your contribution. It's been very, very enlightening for me, and again, I will report that to the group. We already have 5 local chapters that are so local organization in 5 countries that have committed to the breakthrough, and this is one of the way what we are aiming to ensure buy-in from the local actors and engagement from them. But I really take your point here today on how we can make local economy indeed and community thrive through the mangrove breakthrough and make them stewards and champions of this work. So I would like to make a proposal. So here you can see several opportunities for you to support the mangrove breakthrough. If you are a company, please, or an organization, send your logo to Luz at the Nature Conservancy. Then if you are a financial institution, please reach out to me if you want to join the advisory working group to co-design a financial product. We'll have a special event later in the year. It will be held in Abu Dhabi, but we'll have several opportunities to meet virtually to design the work with many of you. And finally, there is also the opportunity to join the OneT.org initiative of the World Economic Forum, which is a key partner of this work. But I would like to add a fourth opportunity, is that you really encourage all of you, if you wish to email me, that I would like to create a civil society, group or advisory group that will be able, as we've done today, to crash test some idea on the work moving forward. And even if we have, mangrove expert, local actors engaged in the work, we have about 35, 40 organization, local organization committed to the mangrove breakthrough. We need your voice to be part of this work. So please email me at ignazbega@climatechampions.team if you want to be part of this work moving forward. And again, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I wish you a pleasant evening. Merci beaucoup.